So, a second House of Commons defeat in 24 hours. All of this piling the pressure on Theresa May and her Brexit deal.
The setback was led by rebel Conservative MPs who joined forces with Labour. And this morning, Jeremy Corbyn will say a general election is now the only way forward. Richard Burgon is the Shadow Justice Minister and joins us from Westminster. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Burgon. So, now, most people will not have followed every twist and turn of yesterday in the House of Commons. You'll be aware of that. It's unfolding. But can you just outline for me what you think was achieved in this motion that is forcing Theresa May, if indeed she loses the vote, to come back with Plan B within 3 days? Why is that a good thing to do?
It's a good thing to do because it helps to stop Theresa May trying to hold the country to ransom. She's trying to run the clock down and say you either accept her rotten deal or you accept a disastrous no deal. And all the practised traffic jams of lorries, the circling boats and the rest of it are all part of an operation, really, to try and intimidate Parliament and the country into accepting her second-rate, worst of all worlds deal. So this motion being passed, this amendment being passed, which means she has to come back within 3 days in the event of her rotten deal being voted down, stops her being able to drag it out and therefore wind the clock down in order to put further pressure on people to accept a rotten deal which isn't in the national interest. So in that way it's very positive.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way is that it's absurd because it gives her no time to I mean, if she gets defeated in the vote, we don't know if she will, it gives her no time to rethink or talk to her colleagues in the rest of the EU. I mean, you're putting her in an absurd position.
Well, she has put herself in an absurd position because she's put herself in the position of having ridiculous red lines dictated to her by extreme elements within her own party. She's had 2 years over to negotiate something decent. She's failed to do so. She said she'd go back over the over the Christmas recess to negotiate something better. She's clearly failed to do that. So it's a mess of her own making. But rather than worrying about the mess she's in, I'm worried about the mess that the country's in. And it is not an acceptable choice to put to the country either her rotten deal, which is the worst of all worlds, or a disastrous no-deal Brexit, which as sure as night follows day will lead to job losses, will lead to financial insecurity, and will lead to people's living standards getting worse. It's not appropriate to hold the country to ransom. I mean, we've got a situation where a government is actually trying to hold its own people to ransom. That's wrong and it's immoral. Okay, we need a general election to sort this out.
We're all in the business of clarity at the moment, which is a wonderful thing if we can achieve it. So, in the interest of clarity, if Theresa May loses the vote on Tuesday night, will you be bringing forward a vote of no confidence?
Yes, we'll be bringing forward a vote of no confidence.
Will that happen immediately?
Whether it happens on one day or the next, I can't say at this stage, but we'll definitely be doing it quickly, yes.
Well, that's the kind of, with respect, that's the kind of vague answer that helps no one. I mean, are you saying that it could happen the following week or in a month's time? Or are we talking that, and we're going to know on Tuesday night, so presumably you will get together with your fellow shadow cabinet members and you'll make a decision, won't you? I mean, what could stop you from doing it at that point?
You're right, we will make a decision, but it'll happen quickly. I can't announce now whether it's the Tuesday, the Wednesday, whatever it may be. It'll happen quickly.
Oh, well, I mean, we're in one of these slightly absurd positions. So are you saying it will happen next week?
It'll happen within a matter of days. It'll happen quickly. You needn't worry. We're eager to bring a motion of no confidence in this rotten, wretched government as quickly as we can in terms of being able to win it.
The reason I'm pursuing this is because it's one of the frustrations some people feel, and you must be aware of this by now, about Labour's position, which, well, why is that such a hard question? She loses the vote. You know what you think. Why can't you tell us now that by the end of next week, you'll have brought that vote of no confidence?
Well, I don't think it is one of the great dissatisfactions. When I've been out in my own constituency and elsewhere, I can honestly say nobody has said to me the big thing they're worried about is whether Labour's going to be bringing a no-confidence motion on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning or Thursday morning or whatever the rest of it is. What people are concerned about is that the country's divided and the government are holding the people to ransom, saying accept their rotten deal or a disastrous no-deal Brexit.
So help us with this one. We understand that Theresa May is appealing directly to some of your MPs, Labour MPs, specifically on the issues of workers' rights. Now, I know Jeremy Corbyn is due to speak today. That's one of your key themes, isn't it? That one of the problems here is workers' rights. Now, have you had a conversation with any of your MPs who've been in to see Theresa May or had those phone calls? I'm not sure how it's working in practice. Do you know what those conversations are? And is it working? Is she appealing to your MPs?
Well, Theresa May wants to get her rotten deal through in any way she can. Obviously, workers' rights are important, but I would take the newspaper stories about that with a pinch of salt. We'd want to see legally binding promises in relation to the protection of workers' rights. And also, I have to say, the history of the Conservative Party and workers' rights is not a very positive one. So I take the whole thing with a pinch of salt.
So you're dismissing it before you even know what it is she's proposing?
No, I'm taking it with a pinch of salt, given the history of the Conservative Party on workers' rights, but also understanding that a desperate Prime Minister may make all sorts of empty promises. What we want are legally binding promises when it comes to protecting workers' rights.
And just one other thought, looking forward, you want a general election. You've been very clear about that, at least that part of it. In your general election manifesto, will it say we'll have a referendum on, supposing you were to win the election, here we go on the ifs, supposing you're to win the general election, would you have it in your manifesto that you will have a referendum?
Well, our manifesto will be democratically decided in due course.
Do you want that in your manifesto?
Well, as I say, it's for the members to decide.
Yes, do you want it?
Do I want it personally? What I want to do is what we are doing, which is to follow the Labour Party policy.
Now, I'm sorry, the question was, would you like, in the Labour Party manifesto, your input into that debate, would you like a referendum in your manifesto in the event of a general election? What do you think?
I think we are getting ahead of ourselves here. The Labour Party conference set out a clear policy, a sequence of events. It did say that in the event of a deadlock, and if a general election doesn't happen, then all options, including a public vote and other options, would be on the table to be considered. I think we'd be careful not to get ahead of ourselves. But let me make this clear. The reason we want a general election is to actually bring people together, because whether people live in Huddersfield and voted Leave, or whether people live in Hackney and voted Remain, they're united by facing the same problems of the housing crisis, austerity, low wages, debt, attacks on their public services. So I think that a general election is not only the democratic way out of this deadlock, but can bring people together so that the people can decide not only on a new deal with Europe, but on a new deal for everyone across our diverse communities who've been attacked by this ruthless Conservative government.
Richard Burgon, thank you very much for your time this morning. Richard Burgon is Labour's Shadow Justice Secretary.